Hello. As we look back at the month of June, man, it's hard to believe that we're already halfway through 2026. So I'll look at the month in particular, then we'll look at the second quarter as a whole, and even really touch on a little bit of the full first half. So starting with June, June was a mixed month when it comes to the equity markets. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained about 2.5%, while the S&P 500 declined 1.1%, and the Nasdaq fell about 2.8%. Despite the headline weakness in some of those areas like the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq, there really was a lot more market participation that was broad throughout this month. If we look at the S&P 500 not on the cap weighted index but from the equal weighted index, the equal weighted index outperformed the traditional cap weighted index by about 3%. So you could see that there was a lot more participation in the market, but those companies at the very top that were weighted more heavily were ones that really brought that index down this month. One of the most notable stories throughout the month, and it's been a notable story throughout the whole second quarter and the whole year in 2026, has been artificial intelligence. Semiconductors and memory chips in particular really benefited during the month of June. We're up over double digits for the month. At the same time, many of the Mag 7 names that have benefited in the past couple years really struggled this month, particularly Microsoft, Amazon, Meta. All three of those companies were down by double digits in the month of June. Investors are rotating some funds away from some of those largest technology names and putting it towards other areas of the AI infrastructure build out. Another major development during the month of June was the easing of geopolitical tensions between the US and Iran. They signed a ceasefire agreement helping to reopen some of the shipping lanes through the Strait of Hormuz. This is important because we need those oil prices and want those oil prices to come down, and we saw that they have been coming down, where towards the end of the month they were just below about $70 per barrel. Markets also focused heavily on the Federal Reserve policy this month in June. The newly appointed chair, Kevin Warsh, surprised investors with a little more hawkish tone than they were thinking he would come in with. He remained committed and said the entire committee was committed to price stability or bringing inflation back down closer to their 2% target, which hasn't happened since pre-pandemic or before in the last 5 or 6 years. That was a little bit of a shock to the market, caused a few days of volatility. But the good thing is the economic data has remained resilient. We've seen payroll growth exceed expectations. We've seen retail sales that were stronger than anticipated, and manufacturing activity improved as well. So even though the Fed there's a little bit of uncertainty when it comes to the next move from the Fed perspective, we think they'll continue to be on pause for the foreseeable future, and they're only going to raise rates if absolutely necessary, given that this economic data has remained so resilient, and it gives them the ability to be a little bit cautious. As we zoom out and look at the second quarter as a whole, the Dow gained about 13%, the Nasdaq gained about 20% in the second quarter, and the S&P was up almost 15% for the quarter. So really just a tremendous quarter when it comes to market growth. It was the strongest quarter for the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq since the post-pandemic rally back in 2020. So really a tremendous quarter when it comes to market growth. AI was not only the theme in June, but it's been the theme in the second quarter and really the whole year in 2026 as well. We're seeing that these AI companies have been the biggest winners in the markets, but there are other businesses that are also rewarded, especially if they contribute to some part of that AI ecosystem. Despite the enthusiasm, that does not mean that some tougher questions aren't being asked when it comes to AI, or when it comes to monetization, return on the investment they're making, all of this large amount of CapEx spending that these companies are investing into this AI. They want to make sure that there's a meaningful return that's coming from all of this AI spending. But that being said, the broader trend still continues to remain extremely positive. I mean, still really the leader in the market at the moment. Earnings in the second quarter were fantastic. The earnings that came out in the second quarter, so those first quarter earnings were fantastic. Not only in the tech names, but also in the other sectors of the market. Earnings were extremely strong in this past quarter. We think they're going to be strong throughout the remainder of the year as well. Overall, the first half of the year, put the markets in a very strong position, and we're excited about the second half of this year. We do want to be mindful of the election that will be midterm election that'll be coming up a little bit later in the year. That could provide some choppiness or some volatility, but really do think the markets have been resilient and the consumer has been resilient in the midst of so many areas of uncertainty. Hope you all had a great month of June. Hope you have a wonderful 4th of July and a great month of July as well. See you next month.